global and even national attempts to deal with climate change are going to cause way more trouble than accumulated carbon dioxide.
In this compelling video, Jordan Peterson presents a critical examination of the collapse of values, which he views as more significant of a threat than even climate change. His perspective challenges us to consider how global efforts to combat environmental crises might inadvertently sow seeds of political chaos. Peterson's insights serve as a stark reminder of the balance that we need to strike between our physical and ethical environments. However, that's just the beginning. His teachings offer numerous lessons on the importance of safeguarding our moral compass amid world crises.
When it becomes a global planetary threat that's a crisis, then it's a justification for virtually any political action.
Peterson, a renowned clinical psychologist and professor, emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility, particularly during these turbulent times. Through his keen interest in psychoanalytic and Jungian perspectives, he underscores how our response to societal changes shape our collective future. His insights remind us of the profound impact of our individual and collective choices, particularly in the face of a value system collapse. But this is only a starting point. Peterson's teaching hold a wealth of wisdom that can guide us through these challenging times.
One of the things that's happening to us is the political has collapsed into the religious. So there's this New Testament statement that Christ makes. It's an unbelievably impactful statement. It's a statement that is in some sense miraculous in its effects. You render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. And the entire formal separation of church and state in the Western world is a consequence of that statement. You just think of that, how impactful that statement was. That's literally the case. I don't care if you're religious or not. It's irrelevant. Historically, that's the case. That statement did that. So that's a miracle, in some real sense.
In this video, Peterson underscores the significance of adaptability in the face of drastic societal shifts. He explores the need for flexibility and resilience when navigating through the periods of upheaval that we do sometimes, particularly when the profane threatens the sacred. His insights emphasize our collective need to adapt to preserve our moral landscape. However, this is just one piece of the larger picture. Peterson's teaching offers a host of other insights, each offering a unique perspective on navigating societal uncertainties.
Well, let's say that's true psychologically as far as I'm concerned, as well as politically, is that there's a domain that's sacred and there's a domain that's profane. And that's true psychologically. And if you don't keep those separate, then the sacred contaminates the profane. Or alternatively, the profane gets inflated into the sacred. And that's a catastrophe, because then everything becomes emotionally overwrought. Because you're no longer a political enemy, you're an emissary of Satan. I mean, that's essentially what happened to me with the Red Skull, It got pushed that far. It was right to the point of ultimate absurdity. It's like, really? Like Nazi isn't a bad enough epithet? I have to be a magical super Nazi? And really? That's really necessary? Well, what's going on? Well, obviously, because Red Skull, you think of that, Red Skull is Satan for all intents and purposes. It's only a matter of nomenclature, and so it's not like the Marvel universe is Christian, but it is in a profound sense. I mean, all those movies have underlying religious themes, fighting off the demonic extraterrestrial aliens that are invading the earth. It's all played out in the domain of religious ideation. I mean, Thor is a god, for God's sake. It's not like this is hard to see. Well, if the profane becomes inflated with the sacred, then you demonize your enemies, and then maybe you sacralize yourself as well, and that's not so good. You're an environmentalist. It's like, well, are you sure you're not the Messiah? Are you sure that's not what you're doing? You're the savior of the planet. It's like, are you sure that's so good for your ego? And it's not. It's not. The earth has to orbit the sun in Jung's terminology, or If it falls into the sun, it's a catastrophe. And all sorts of discussions we're having are becoming inflated with religious concerns. And then, on the materialist atheist side, let's say the scientific side, although it's not really that, there's this insistence that religion is nothing but a set of mistaken scientific propositions about the nature of reality, which it's certainly, that's not a very sophisticated analysis. And I've seen this sort of thing start to happen to people like Richard Dawkins. I mean, he's fallen prey. He's become victim to the collapse of the religious into the political. It's not good. And this has nothing to do with arguments about, do I believe in God or does God exist? It's like, that's not the point of this. That's not the point. That's not the issue here. The issue is we have a religious instinct. And then the question is why? And then the question is, well, what happens when it's not nourished? Where does it go? What does it do? Well, the rationalist idea is, well, if we get rid of all that superstitious claptrap, we'll just be like straight rationalist materialists and the world will move in a positive direction. It's like, no, wrong, too simple. That isn't, where do we get our values? And that's the conversation I'm trying to have with people. That's a big part of it is, look, science does not provide values. We need values or nihilism or reigns. And you want that? No. So where do we get our values? And if there are values, are some values higher than others? And if so, what are the highest values? And what are they opposed to? And how do we embody them? These aren't conversations for children. This is serious stuff, and it's underneath all this noise and terror that we see playing out so destructively. So you see what that does to your soul. You're on Twitter. You get tangled up in these political arguments. It just hurts you. It's not good for you.
Peterson discusses the opportunity for introspection and growth during challenging societal shifts. His perspective encourages us to view these times as a mirror for collective introspection and societal development. His insights urge us to use these challenging times as catalysts for societal growth and transformation. However, this is just the beginning. I keep saying it. Peterson's teaching extend far beyond the concept, offering much more to learn and apply that can significantly influence our approach to societal development.
I worked on a UN committee, it's got to be 10 years ago now, to help draft the UN Secretary General's report on sustainable economic development. And so I looked at all sorts of things like that. I was very curious, for example, about, because people have been beating the overpopulation drum since, well, it really kicked in the 1960s, because there were dire predictions. By the year 2000, the Club of Rome came out and said, well, there'll be riots and mass starvation and mass movement of migrants and all the things you hear about climate change because there's too many people on the planet. And that just didn't happen at all. That was just that. It wasn't just wrong, it was anti-true. It was absolutely wrong. What happened instead was that everyone got way richer, and the bottom section of the population in terms of economic distribution got lifted out of poverty. Inequality still exists, but that's that power law phenomenon we already talked about. Not that that's trivial, it's just unbelievably difficult to determine what to do with. There are solutions, but certainly getting rid of capitalism isn't the solution. And so I looked at population trends and first of all found, not that this is an act of genius or anything, that as soon as you educate women, the size of family shrinks precipitously, like below replacement. And that's partly because women have other options. I mean, all the countries in the West are way below replacement. Korea is way below replacement. South Korea, Japan, way below replacement. Yeah, I think Nigeria will have more people in it than China by the end of the century. So, yeah. And Musk, he's a far-looking man, and so he's looking around the apocalyptic corner, let's say, and like, we're running out of people. And what that means, of course, is that you run out of young people, right? You don't run out of old people first, because everyone who is here now is going to be 30 years older in 30 years, and it'll be young people we don't have enough of, and of course, young people are the ones who do the innovation and are going to do most of the heavy lifting, etc. And so there's going to be a terrible shortage of young people.
Peterson emphasizes the importance of maintaining hope and optimism during these challenging times. Despite being embroiled in numerous controversies, his insights highlight the power of a positive mindset in overcoming adversity and moving forward. he urges us to stay hopeful and to look forward to better days, even when society is going through major difficulties. However, this is just a glimpse into Peterson's vast wisdom. His teachings are filled with valuable guidance on resilience, perseverance, and societal development. Each insight offers a fresh perspective on how to navigate societal challenges with courage and optimism.
Yeah, well, and this idea that the planet has too many people on it, there's no sentiment more implicitly genocidal than that statement. So what do you mean too many people? Exactly. And what do you mean the planet? And what do you propose to do about that exactly? Mass abortion, is that your answer? Or should we do something a little more dramatic? Maybe we'll just shame people out of having children. And I've seen people do that, literally. I saw a professor talking to a couple hundred students, and one of the professors who was an environmentalist activist type, and he got up on stage and shook his finger to the whole young crowd, saying that him and his wife had only decided to have one child, which was, in my opinion, one child too many for him, and told all the young people there if they had a shred of ethical decency that they would severely limit their reproductive potential. And I stood up and said that I thought that was one of the most appalling things I'd ever heard anyone in academia say to young people, which is really saying something, because they say plenty of appalling things. And it was a very uncomfortable moment, and he huffed off the stage. But, you know, in a frenzy, talking about how you couldn't talk about such things without being pilloried on ethical grounds. And yeah, that's for sure. You come out as a emissary of the academic establishment. You tell young people that humanity is so corrupt that they should seriously consider not propagating because that violates the deepest of ethical norms, and you think that's a good thing and that that's your right. And it was just beyond comprehension. It's beyond comprehension, but it's associated with like a deeply rooted existential self-hatred. Yeah, well, we're a cancer on the planet, you know, unchecked growth, just like a cancer. It's like, that's us, a cancer. It's okay. We know where your heart is located. Because what's the implications for a doctrine like that? What do you do with the cancer?
Cut it out.
Yeah, that's for sure. Poison it or whatever. There's nothing you don't do to a cancer. So you're going to use a metaphor like that? There's too many people on the planet. You're going to use a metaphor like that? You know, and then you're going to also decide that you're virtuous while you're using it because you're on the side of the planet, whatever the hell that means. So yeah, it's unbelievable, and a huge part of it's rooted in this existential shame and horror at the condition of being human, and the fact that life is rife with suffering, and a lot of it's unjustified. And you know, it's a Mephistophelian position. So Mephistopheles was laid out, portrayed in Goethe's Faust. That's the story of a man who sold his soul to the devil for knowledge. It's a story of intellectual pride, and Goethe stands in relationship to German literature in the same manner that Shakespeare stands in relationship to English literature. And Goethe's Mephistopheles says straight out twice in the play, once in the first, there's two books, and once in the first book and once in the second. Goethe has him restate it twice. Existence is such a foul thing because of all its suffering, essentially, that it would be better if it was merely annihilated. And that's the Mephistophelian stance. This whole show should just come to a halt. Look at how corrupt people are. Evil reigns everywhere. It's nothing but will to power. We're destroying the planet with our unchecked ambition, all of it rooted in greed and Machiavellianism and jockeying for position. And we're so contemptible that we should just roll up and die. And we should shame women into not having children. And we should shame men so they never manifest any planet-destroying ambition. And it's unbelievably appalling. It goes all the way down to the bottom of things. That's what's tearing our culture apart, this dispute about the nature of existence at the most fundamental level.